Morning guys, I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters and the Pathfinder School. What I thought I'd do today is start a new series of videos on how to recreate your own trapping tools or obtain your own trapping tools fairly cheaply. There's lots and lots of trap tools on the market that they sell to use for trapping. Some of them are fairly inexpensive, but most of them are more than it would cost you to make them yourself or find something that will do the job yourself, say at a flea market, a scrap yard, an estate sale, or something like that. You're already going to have money wrapped up in the traps themselves. And you can find traps used as well, so look for them. You can find them on trapping groups where people are selling used traps. That's probably the best place to buy used traps, because if you go to a flea market or an antique mall or something like that looking for traps, if it's got one speck of rust on it, it's automatically an antique, even if it was made last year. So pay attention to that. You shouldn't be paying more than about $4 at the most a piece for a good trap that's in good shape, that is an older model trap, anything from a single long spring to a double long spring in a smaller size, something you can catch raccoons, possums, mink, muskrat, things like that in, up to a double long spring or maybe a coil spring of some sort, like a small number 1.5 coil. Even 110 to 120, 160 conibears shouldn't cost you any more than that if you're buying them used. If you're buying them new, they're going to cost you a little more. Now, some traps you'll probably have to buy fairly new because they haven't been around long enough to be a lot of them used on the market, like coon cuffs, which we're going to discuss first in this series. Because what we're going to do is we're going to explore each type of trap that you would use, talk about what that trap can be used to catch, and then we're going to explore the tools we have to have for setting that trap and how we can make or obtain them cheaply. And we'll show you how to use those tools to set those traps along the way. But I would encourage you to refer back to my modern trapping series, because there's over 50 videos in there of making sets, making catches, processing animals, all of that kind of stuff is in there. But this will show you how to do those types of things or make those implements a little bit less expensive. Now, some of this stuff, the caveat to that is, to make some things, you need tools to make tools. And it's one of those old self-reliance adages. I always buy tools that will help me make other tools. So things like anvils and forges and grinders and saws and welders, those type things, if you have a good knowledge of how to manufacture things, you can make anything you want in a homestead environment. So I would encourage you to invest your money in those places and then learn to manufacture the other things that you need. So let's start with a coon cuff. Okay, so let's talk about these coon cuffs for a minute. The way these things are made is it's a steel tube with a spring-loaded bar on the inside that wraps around the inside in a channel. And you can just see that popped off. And what happens is that is what captures their foot. They have push triggers, pull triggers, and push-pull triggers. This trigger is a pull trigger. So when they're going down inside to get the bait and get it out, they're pulling on the bar, and that's what's going to set off this trap. So basically you just squeeze it down, flip the dog over the top and hold it in place. Shove the trigger over the top of it just like that. When that trigger gets pulled on the inside, that lever that's on the inside here, when it gets pulled by the animal, it releases the trap and captures their foot. And they call these a dog-proof trap because they're designed to not catch things like cats and dogs. They will catch skunks, they will catch possum, and they will definitely catch coons like you're going out of style. This is probably the easiest trap to get started with. And some people would tell you that they're difficult to learn how to set and get numbers on. But I don't teach trapping really for gathering lots of fur and filling up the fur shed and getting a good fur check. I'm teaching people how to trap to get food. With this trap, you can get food. It's very uncomplicated. It takes very few tools. In theory, if you knew where to set this trap, all you really have to do is run some wire through this swivel, wrap it around something solid like a tree, shove this stake in the ground just like this in the right location, fill this thing up with dog food, just dry dog food or cat food. I use cat food most of the time. Dry cat food, spray some fish oil trailing scent out there to bring the coon into your set, and you're going to have a coon in this thing. It's not a difficult trap to set at all. All right, so the other beauty of this trap is it doesn't take much paraphernalia to use this trap. It's got to be tagged. I've got a copper tag on mine. It's got my name and my trapping license number on it. But you could also make that very easily from aluminum pop can that you upcycle. Cut it into strips, scribe onto it with some type of metal awl or something pointed that will dig into the metal, wrap it around the chain, and you got your trap tagged. Didn't cost you anything to do that. So what do we really need to set this? Well, we're gonna have to have something to secure it. So we can use wire for that, in which case all we need is a roll of wire and a wire cutter, a set of wire cutters. And that could be your multi-tool. Your multi-tool's got wire cutters on it, so it's not a problem. You can make wooden stakes with your axe and your knife if you needed to use a stake for this, and that would work fine. Or you could wire it to a tree or something nearby, or root or something like that. So using this trap is very, very simple and really doesn't require you to carry any tools that you don't already have. Now, one thing that I would say with this is, and there's nothing wrong with making wooden stakes, nothing wrong at all. But if you're gonna carry a lot of these traps and you're gonna put deep stakes in the ground because you don't want a 25-pound coon yanking this thing off of a wooden stake or pulling a wooden stake out of the ground on you. Although, the reason wooden stakes work so well is because as they got wet, they swelled up in the ground and they held better that way. But steel stakes are probably the way to go. So what I would say with this is, other than trap wire, you're gonna need stakes to really, really secure these things down if you can't find a place to tie them onto. So the first thing we're gonna talk about is making stakes, because that's probably a tool that you're gonna use throughout this series with almost every trap we talk about, is some kind of a stake to secure them. So I'm gonna show you a simple way to make a 2-foot stake that's 2 feet long and 1/2 inch in diameter right now. Stay with me. All right, one of the cheapest ways to make these stakes is rebar. You can buy rebar in pre-cut lengths at just about any hardware store. You can find rebar that you can cut down yourself at a lot of construction sites and scrap if you just ask for it. A lot of times they'll just give it to you. You can find it at scrap yards and you can buy it by the pound. But I would say that, no pun intended, pound for pound, rebar is one of your cheapest materials that you can use to recycle for other things. We're gonna use rebar a lot in this series. The other two things you need are a fender washer and a 5/8 nut, 5/8 inch nut. All right, we're gonna use this for the top of our stake. And then we're going to grind this off to clean it up so that the welds stick good and so that everything fits over the top of it well. And we're also going to grind one of it to a point. And we could just use a cheap bench grinder for that we could buy at a yard sale. Or we could use a belt sander. It doesn't really matter what you use. You just want to grind one side to a point, and you want to clean off one side so that the nut and the washer fit over the top of it, and it's nice and clean for the weld. Stay with me. We'll be right back and weld this up. Okay, once we have our trap stakes made, then we can move on to the next thing, because we're gonna need to make multiples of these. However many traps we're gonna have on our line, especially if they're land sets, like double long springs, double coils, single coils, things for like coyote-sized animals, even coon as well. You're gonna wanna double stake those traps if you can. So you're gonna want 2 stakes for every trap you plan to set. I would go ahead and make yourself at least a dozen of these so you got enough for 6 traps to start out with.